Well, like most of you, or many of you, I've been interested in Microvita since about 1986 when it was first introduced. It was a few years later that I heard, because Baba, after he introduced the subject, he told more and more in the next few years about Microvita. One of the comments that I heard he had said, it was not in print, but because what was in print was that he said billions of Microvita formed carbon atoms, and in fact they formed all of the chemical elements. And I also heard a quote that millions of Microvita form an electron. An electron is a part of an atom, it's one particle. So with millions of Microvita forming an electron, billions of Microvita forming the different atoms, because of my background in physics, I started thinking, well, how could it be that millions of Microvita could form an electron? So that started me thinking about how could I understand or explain that. And so I started to think how I could describe Microvita in such a way that it would be scientifically acceptable to think of the idea that Microvita compose the elementary particles of physics. The electron is one of the simplest ones. So my approach was actually to look at several different things that P.R. Sarkar had said about Microvita, and then sort of using my own kind of intuition and physics ideas to see what I could come up with and to see where I could go with it. In other words, how far could I take the ideas? It turned out that when I modeled my electron as being made of Microvita, the speed of the Microvita was sometimes faster than light and sometimes slower than light. I'll get to that to show you why, but therefore it turned out that a better word to describe my microvitum in my model was a transluminal microvitum. It means it could sometimes move faster than light, sometimes move slower than light, and therefore pass through the speed of light many times per second without violating any principle of relativity, because I'm not talking about electrons traveling faster than light, only the energy within an electron circulating maybe faster than light, maybe slower than light, alternating from one to another. So I introduced the concept of transluminal microvitum, and actually when I presented this talk, I didn't use the word microvitum. I'm using it here because we all know something about microvitum, but I used the word quantum. I called my microvitum, which developed out of my thinking about microvita, I called it a quantum, but a particular kind of quantum, a quantum that had the property that it created actual physical particles. So my quantum is a new concept in physics. It's not just the same word as in quantum mechanics. It's actually a particle who, by way of its movement, creates photons when it moves in one way, creates electrons when it moves in a different way. It could produce quarks if it moved in a different way. So it's a particle, you can think of it more subtle than physical particles, having energy, having a particular kind of movement, but actually forming physical particles when it moves different ways. So I called it a transluminal quantum. Here I'm calling it a transluminal microvitum because it may be that it's a microvitum, really, but in a sense it has quantum properties as well. It contains information about it follows the laws of quantum measurements in momentum, in spin. It's associated with quantum mechanics. So it may be that there is a deep relationship between microvita and quantum theory. Anyway, so this model doesn't explain everything about an electron, but it contains many of the properties, known properties of electrons. It's based on a photon model, so it integrates, you can say, the electromagnetism of photons and electrons. Another thing is that quarks are considered the simplest particles of the nucleus, and a quark and an electron can have basically the same structure. They both have the same spin, they both are point-like, they both are spin 1/2. It may be that a quark is just a miniature electron that has, in addition, it has nuclear properties, but its structure could be basically the same. So the fundamental properties of physics are, particles are the electron and the quark. I mean, neutrino is another particle. The neutrino has its own very small mass. It could also be related to a motion of a microvita in different ways. So in summary, the idea that a microvitum, being a more subtle entity than either a electron or a photon or a proton, could create those other particles by the form of its movement, and therefore the microvitum could be kind of at an intermediate stage between something more subtle, at a subtler level of matter, and the physical matter that's we measure in experiments.